Just let me know if you can see me in the chat. Y'all, today's going to be a little bit strange, I think. Hopefully not. Just let me know if you can see me in the chat. Y'all, today's going to be a little bit strange, I think. Hopefully not. Just let me know if you can see me in the chat. Y'all, today's going to be a little bit strange, I think. Actually, not see me, hear me. You should be seeing the anatomy program. As well as your own chat. That's going to be weird. Test from my phone. Actually, not see me, hear me. You should be seeing the anatomy program. As well as your own chat. Did she?
She's on tummy.
Successfully rolled over.
Huh?
All right. This is picking up everything we said.
Oh, bye.
All right, it looks like I've got some people in the chat or some watchers. Would somebody just say something in the chat just to make sure the loop is complete so you can hear me and I can see you? I'm trying to do a strange thing using my phone as kind of a confirmation device, I guess. All right, Paola's here, and you can hear me, Paola, just fine. I think I have your sketchbook too, by the way. All right, cool. It is 1 after. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today, what I'm going to do, since I've closed the loop, a couple of people said they can hear me. I can see the chat coming up. Good morning, Alonzo. I'm going to run us through arm anatomy, and I think that's going to be the live stream for today, since last week was kind of our test week, and I did the black paper drawing on Wednesday. I'm going to do arm anatomy today in preparation for the arm quiz. And then tomorrow's live stream at 10 a.m. Will be another black paper drawing, so you can tune in and follow along with a different reference, which I'll also put on Canvas, so you can use the one that we did. You can use the reference that we did already on Wednesday, or you can use the reference that we're going to use tomorrow. So whichever of the two seems easier or comes off better for you, whatever. You should have 2 sheets of black paper. And that'll be 2 potential drawings to turn in. You'll only turn in 1, of course, but you'll have the opportunity to do 2 of them. All right, before we get started, I just want to make sure I hit a few things before we kick off, one of which is, the stuff that was due last night. So just a recap of those things. It was the drawings of negative shapes and shadow shapes, as well as the critique portion of that. So if you haven't posted your drawings, if you turned your drawings into me, but you haven't posted them yet in the critique area, I would encourage you to do so. It's technically not due, in scare quotes, until next Sunday in the critique area, but your critique is also kind of due that same time. So just get those turned in as soon as possible to the critique area. You've already submitted them to me potentially. Put them in the critique discussions so that people have this week to respond to the drawings and everybody gets their sort of critique points for this. If there are any questions, if you have any hang-ups or any issues, just let me know. And we can kind of work through whatever the issues are, I think. So that was one thing, those drawings and please put them in the critique area as well. The other thing was the leg anatomy quiz, and there was another one. Oh, gestures, the gesture sketchbook. So just to recap on that too, if it's easier for you to do 10 gestures on one sheet of newsprint and just take one picture, you can do it that way. Or if you want to take 10 pictures, one each page of your sketchbook, that's fine with me, and just upload those. I've had people do both, and honestly, it's all good. So I'm going to try to send out reminders on Saturdays of things that are due on Sunday. I think the last one, please forgive me for the daughter running around in hard shoes. That's just the name of the game. Hopefully you can hear me much more clearly than that. So anyway, the sketchbook gestures, it's up to you, whatever is most convenient. Sketchbook, 10 pictures, that's fine. One sheet of newsprint, that's fine as well. All right, well, let's kick off with the anatomy breakdown here. We're going to be doing anatomy of the arm, which is our final anatomical sort of discussion before we head into anatomical drawings, which probably won't be next week, but the week after that. So I'll walk you through doing an anatomical drawing as well during the live streams of that week. All right, so let's go ahead and kick off. Give me just a moment. I'm gonna see if I can put a stop to that pounding. I'm just sending a text to my wife. All right. Hopefully that does it. Hey, Frenchie's in here as well. Cool. All right, so let's kick off. 10:05, let's get going. All right, so the way this is going to go, we're going to walk through all of the muscles first that we're going to cover, and then we're going to go into the bones. Just a reminder about your handouts. Anywhere you see the number associated with the anatomical feature that we cover is where you see that anatomical feature in the drawing. So there should be some pretty good action poses that show you the way these muscles and things appear in motion in an actual posed model. As always, the 3D program that we're using is going to be pretty static. That's just the nature of it. Okay, so let's go with number one. Number one is the first muscle we're going to cover, deltoides. So if I roll, there we go. This shoulder muscle, the deltoids, or if you're a gym person, you might call them your deltoids, but the muscle itself is called deltoides. And it's the shoulder muscle. It's what gives us this rounded shoulder, that rounded look to our shoulder. And oftentimes in the model, that just appears like an oval. It's got that real sort of elliptical shape to it in the shoulders. Makes it very prominent, very easy to see. One thing to note about this is I think a lot of times we just think about it as being a muscle from the front. So we see this bulge like that, and we just kind of leave it there. We leave it at that. But with this muscle, it's important to note that if I look at it from above, and I'm even going to fade these other ones. If I look at it from above, it's got this kind of cup look. So if this is my shoulder, it's like if you were to grab someone by the shoulders, your thumb would be maybe on the front of their shoulder and your fingers would wrap all the way around the back. That's what this muscle is doing as well. It attaches on the front on this collarbone called the clavicle, but we're not going into that. Around this bony landmark, which we will cover, and then all the way along the back as well. So it wraps up here at the top, it wraps all the way around, almost like a hand or something. Right. And then from there, so I'm going to unfade these. From there, it comes out, and actually I'm going to refade. It comes out and attaches on the arm bone here, which is called the humerus. But again, don't have to know that. It's about a third of the way down. So the top of this bone, you can see it poked up under there. And then here's the bottom of that bone. It's not quite halfway, is where this muscle attaches. So it attaches a little bit lower than you might think, sort of down middle of the arm, maybe right across from the chest, the pectoralis muscles, is where this muscle attaches. And it's just on that point. So you can imagine if these muscle fibers got shorter, the arm would swing up this way. If these got shorter, it would kind of swing back this way. If all of them together got shorter, it would swing sort of straight up towards us. So this muscle has quite a wide range of motion. And it's a very prominent muscle. There's very seldom a lot of fat up here. And so you'll see the bone, you'll see this bone quite often. You'll see a dip here. And then you'll see this deltoideus muscle down below that. You'll see a shadow a lot of times here. Right? And that's as, like if I were to pretend I was an ant or something. If I crawl along the surface here, I go down into this divot and then back up like that. So that's sort of what the cross section of that looks like. There's a dip in right here. All right, that's number one, deltoideus. All right, number two, we're starting with relatively well-known things, hopefully. My scroll wheel is a little out of control. Boom. All right. This is on the back of the arm, so note the model position. There's trapezius, latissimus dorsi. We're looking from the back here. This muscle here on the back of the arm is called triceps. Oops. Seps, in anatomical language, seps means heads. So this means triceps means three heads, and you can see them here. There's one, grab my pen. There's 1, 2, 3 heads to this muscle. They all come together and join into this strap of tendon, this flat strap. So remember what I said about these yellow areas. In this program, it means there's no muscle there. It's just a flat strap of tendon. There is a muscle here. One of the heads of this muscle does sit underneath this strap. But right here, it's like these two muscles join together in this flat strap of tendon that comes down and attaches to a bony landmark that we're going to cover in a little bit. All right, and this gives us it gives us our pushing action, like it straightens the arm. It's quite a strong muscle as well. From the side, just the way that this appears often, in fact, let's just look at a few ways this appears. You will seldom see this split up here. That split in the muscle, you don't see very often. Instead, that all fills in. There's fat there and stuff, but you do see this and down. You'll see this little overlap quite often. You'll see it almost a U shape here. And you'll see that one on its way down. So it's almost like that. You'll see a little thing peeking out. You'll see it's either a U shape. Sometimes you'll see a little split like that, like a little, if the model's got some good musculature, you'll see a little split there. So maybe that's what this muscle's doing, like that. Down to that elbow. All right, sometimes you see this, sometimes you don't. And then you've got more arm coming out from below and below like that. All right. From the side, one of the major things you see from the side is this contour and a little overlap like that. You'll see that kind of situation right here where you have a contour that juts in. That's a little bit drastic, but you'll get the idea. Like that. And then deltoides comes out from above right here. All right, and we'll see that in an example here in a little bit. All right, there's triceps. That's number 2. Number 3, biceps. We're keeping it simple. Out on the front of the model here. Biceps, triceps means 3 heads. Biceps means 2 heads. So this is that muscle just down the front of the arm. There are 2 heads, but you don't really see them. So you can see them split up underneath the deltoides. You see how this muscle has 2 heads. One wraps up around there, one goes straight. But they get hidden. Just like in the back, you seldom see this split here. Instead, that ends up just kind of being a single mass. If the person's really rather muscular, you might see those 2 start to split. All right, and this gives us our, if these muscle fibers were to get shorter, this arm would bend. So that lifting motion with the arm, that's what this muscle gives us. In fact, if I fade others, you can see tendons wrap in, down, and attach to this bone here, which is called the radius, and it just lifts. It's partially involved in curling the arm up. There's also another muscle, which we're going to cover right now, that joins in this action, that is often ignored. The biceps get a lot of attention, but this next muscle is arguably just as important. Number 4, it's called brachialis. And it sits just underneath the biceps. So there I've faded things. If I bring things back, so you can see the biceps here, you see brachialis sitting behind biceps, providing this other sort of bumpy contour. And if I fade the others, it attaches to the other lower arm bone. So you've got biceps attaches to this bone over here, brachialis attaches to this bone here, and together they lift that arm up quite strongly. And in really muscular people, you can see this starts to become a big muscle of its own, and it can push biceps right out of the way as it gets larger and larger. You see that a lot in bodybuilder types too. You can see this muscle really becoming prominent. But even in people who aren't bodybuilders, you can still see this muscle, particularly down on the inside here. There's a nice contour that it makes right there, a nice overlap with the back of the arm. You'll often see that kind of double overlap going on. And in the model we'll see it pretty clearly. It'll look like biceps, but it's not really. It's this muscle, and it's kind of large in the example as well. All right, that was number 4. Number 5, brachioradialis. These are similarly named. So we have biceps, we have brachialis, we have brachioradialis. There's a lot of brachio going on. Brachio just means the arm, like it has to do with this part of the arm. So brachialis is a muscle that starts on this part of the arm and attaches down here. Brachioradialis starts on that same part of the arm and heads down to this bone, which is called the radius. So brachioradialis really just telling you where that muscle is, where it goes. It starts up here, right there, on the brachium, and it ends right there on the radius. So it's brachio, literally just telling you where this muscle goes. The nice thing about this muscle is it's a good divider muscle. Like, look what it does. First off, it gives us a very strong silhouette. So from about middle of the arm, right where triceps starts to disappear, out comes brachioradialis. It gives us a nice, that is a very strong sort of silhouette contour. Right, so it gives us that nice silhouette, and it's a good divider muscle. The down in the forearm, if you look down here, it gets pretty confusing. There's a lot of stuff going on down here, but we're going to group them into groups that are divided from each other, and this muscle is what does the dividing on the outside. So here it is. And this is two muscles. I've grouped them together because they kind of flow from the same origin and end sort of in the same region as well. Technically, that muscle does not belong. That's not brachioradialis, but I'm going to include it because they're kind of structurally they're together. All right, so look what it does up here. Here we have triceps. So here's this. Notice there's no, from deltoides, which is this little V here, there's no muscle crossover. Triceps branches towards the back right here. Brachialis and biceps branch towards the front like that. We saw this in the back of the leg a little bit too. You have a muscle splitting one way and another muscle splitting the other way, and then out from between the gap comes that muscle. And it's helpful to know that. It's helpful to piece it together that way so that you can figure out what it is that you're looking at. Okay, where does this big muscle group go? Where does that big muscle group go? Once you find that, then you've got your little gap that this muscle comes out from between. All right, and it divides this muscle group from a muscle group on the other side. So we'll talk about those a little bit further on. All right, so 5 brachioradialis. And by a little bit later on, I mean right now. So the other side, number 6, on the other side of this brachioradialis are these muscles. So here's that brachioradialis right through here. On this side, and then there's a bony landmark we'll talk about. So on this side, in between, this flow down what you might think of like down to the back of your hand, the top of your arm, this flows straight down. These are your extensors. And extensors are muscles that open up a joint. So this hand, if these extensors flex, it'll come this way. Your fingers will open up, right, as opposed to curling in. And these are kind of smallish. They run from right behind brachioradialis down the back of your arm, we'll call it, straight down to your fingers and beyond. You can split these out, but we're not going to for the purposes of our drawings. We are just going to stick with extensors here. They run down the back of the hand. Just think about your wrist here. This is that big elbow bone, which we will cover as soon as we get past the other muscles here. We'll talk about the bony landmarks. All right, so those are extensors. All right, on the other side, they are flexors. So we have extensors on the what we're going to call the back of our arm, but on the front or the inside or whatever, we've got flexors. And here's that brachioradialis again. So here I'm going to twist this just a little bit. Here's that brachioradialis again. This is on the inside towards the body when you're standing like this. All of these muscles here are flexors. Again, they have different names and you can separate them out, but often you'll see these as just you might not even see this contour here, but you might. And they run down the underside, lots of tendons there at the wrist. Right, so here you have a branch. There you have brachioradialis. It's all of these inner ones are your flexors. Right, and between them, get rid of this. Between them is this bone. Bone that starts here, ends there, and it kind of makes a straight line right there. And you have muscles that go this way and that way around this point. Right, that's kind of the flow. Here's the wrist. We have muscles that go up like that, muscles that go up like that, and then we have kind of a center. If I'm exaggerating, right, they kind of split around this point. Like that looks like an absurdly muscly forearm all of a sudden. All right, so those are your flexors. That should cover it for muscles. That's how we're going to group the muscles for now. Let's talk about the bony landmarks. These are the solid points down the arm that you can use to route those muscles we just went over. So the first one of those is called the acromion. If I look down from above, and I'm actually going to hide trapezius. This right there and that right there, almost can even think of them as kind of like that. That's the acromion. That is an acromion, that is an acromion. And it's kind of, you can see with trapezius hidden, you can see this is kind of a natural border between the neck and the chest. We saw that down in the waist, right? That asis and piscis, that iliac spine splits the torso. In fact, why don't I just go to it real quick. You can see this divider line here like that. And if I go around back, you can just see that divider line carries, it's like a natural dividing point. You have all of this torso stuff and all of this lower leg stuff, and there's this border between them. Well, acromion's not dissimilar to that. In fact, I'm going to bring trapezius back just so we can see it. So there's a lot of muscles down deep here. We're not going to mess with those, but just check from sternal notch here, which we talked about, low those many weeks ago, all the way out to the acromion here, and then back in there is kind of the divider. The only difference here, you do have trapezius wrapping over the top right here. And again, if I hide that, you can kind of see things stop in the back a little bit. But from the front, it's really, especially up here at the shoulder, it's a really nice split between the upper sort of cape muscle and the muscles of the arm. All right. The nice thing about acromion, if we look at deltoideus, there's the acromion. Deltoideus just kind of like wraps around. It just kind of cups the acromion. So if you can find this bony landmark, like there's the acromion, you know some distance along the back and some distance along the front, that deltoideus muscle is going to sit. All right, so that's the first one. And I'll try to find that one first, that acromion. It's one of the first things that I'm looking for. Next, we need to talk about scapula. And this is a whole bone rather than a bony landmark. And there are some features of it that you should probably make note of. So this is what it looks like if we're looking through the muscles transparently. So I'm looking at this model's back. First thing is note the spine. The spine is straight, and the scapula is, if I were to reduce this to just a simple shape, what I'm dealing with is kind of a right triangle, right? And if I add the oval of the ribs, that itself that's going to start feeling like a skeleton right away. Because that's what those bones, that's how those bones are oriented. Right, so this is a scapula when it's at rest. Like that. If this arm were to lift up, so here we have there's a triangle, there's arm at rest. If that arm can come out to about here, maybe a little higher, with this scapula still oriented like this. But as soon as my arm needs to go up, this scapula has got to rotate. So it has to rotate to accommodate. If you can imagine that being the new arm position. And that's why a lot of times when you see, especially in children, people without a lot of muscular development back here, when this scapula pivots, and it pivots right here at the sternal notch, that's the only place it attaches, is around the front on the sternal notch. The rest of that's a free-floating setup. When it pivots there, scapula up, there's the acromion up to here. You'll often see you'll see that bump of the bone there. Right, let me simplify this. That's what those are going to do when this arm reaches up. They kind of pivot out of the way. They kind of rotate up. And that's important to know because all of the muscles related to them react to that. So let's take a look. I'm going to unfade these. So you see now the green strips here are the only place you see this bone. But check this out. We have part of the scapula. This is called the spine of the scapula. We don't really have to know that specifically, but it comes into the back a ways, pretty much where deltoideus attaches. You get this bone, this bony ridge. In a really muscular person, this bony ridge looks like a divot. In a less muscular person, in a thin person, this bony ridge looks like it juts out. Right? And then trapezius comes from the neck. Oh my goodness. Flows up into the neck like that, and then it borders, boom, boom, down that spine, flips over the spine. That's that part of that scapula, so it flips over that bony ridge on the scapula, and then swoops down to the actual spine. Swoops down to the actual spine. All right, so this is that scapula is a really good decider of what this trapezius does. Not only that, if I hide trapezius, ooh, that model looks uncomfortable already, and hide latissimus dorsi. If I look at these, there's that one. So this is infraspinatus, teres major, teres minor, but we don't have to know that. This all occurs, these muscles, they start on the edge of this scapula. So right down here at the bottom of the scapula is where these muscles end. Scapula heads up. So if you can find the triangle of the scapula, you can find all kinds of muscles in the back. Deltoids, you can find trapezius and where it flips over. You can find infraspinatus and teres major because they only attach on the scapula. This will help you make sense when that arm reaches up or out of position. What are these muscles doing? Well, if you can find that scapula, then you know what these muscles are doing. Reset that. All right, so that's the scapula. Next bony landmark is called the medial epicondyle. And it is this bump right here. Bump, bump. You might feel that on yourself. If you hold your arms in this position, you can feel this bony ridge sticking out. And there's actually a nerve that runs through here. When you hit that on the edge of a table or something, yikes, electric shocks all down your arm. That's your ulnar nerve, but that's your funny bone. Right? And it runs between the groove made by this bony landmark and the next one we're going to talk about, which is the olecranon of the ulna. Let's get rid of the pen. The olecranon of the ulna. And the ulna is this bone that goes down through your forearm. When you bend your elbow all the way, like bend it up, like maybe grab onto the back of your neck and look down at your elbow, that sharp point that you see is this olecranon of your ulna. It's this part of your ulna. Juts out quite strongly. Anytime there's a big bony jut, you know it's important. So here's that olecranon, and here's that strap of tendon from the triceps that attaches to that olecranon. That's a strong strap of tendon. That gives us a lot of leverage to push that arm straight. And then you can kind of see the bump here, medial epicondyle. That medial epicondyle is where your flexors originate. So it's a big, wide piece of bone. Right there, right there. And here's all those flexors as they branch out and down to the wrist tendons there. Right, so in your grabbing, those flexors, those are the muscles that grab. They close your fingers, they hold your wrists up. They're your gripping muscles. So they're super important. They have a real large bone to attach to, a lot of leverage, a lot of force created by those muscles. All right, so just to recap, number 10 is medial epicondyle. Here's the spelling on that again. Medial epicondyle. Number 11 olecranon of the ulna. There is a lateral epicondyle buried up in here. You see all these flexors or these extensors originate there. So that's a good thing to make note of. I'm not going to have you memorize it because it doesn't show up as a bony bump so much as a divot. That's worth mentioning though. If I look at this arm, there's a muscle here and there and here. You'll often see a divot, like an indentation right about there. That's happening right at this lateral epicondyle. It's kind of the third piece of the elbow puzzle is this divot, olecranon, sharp bump, and medial epicondyle, also kind of a sharp bump. All right, and that leaves one more thing. Number 12, which is the head of the ulna. And I'm just going to leave it like this. Head of the ulna is right here and right there. It's where that ulna bone comes out from underneath the muscles. And I can feel mine. Like if I go all the way down my arm, I can feel this straight bone that runs. There's the other part of it. It runs kind of straight down. This is the other divider. Oops. Oof. All right. The other divider, we have olecranon of the ulna, head of the ulna. If I find those two, I can pretty much plot a straight line between them. I'll have flexors on one side, I'll have extensors on the other side, and here's that brachioradialis divider as well. So that ulna, knowing that is quite helpful. If you can find the olecranon, find the head, run a straight line between them, it will help you structure out a forearm area quite quickly and quite efficiently. All right, I'm going to move on to an image overlay. Please let me know in the chat if I missed anything, or also in the chat just say, nope, everything looks good. You were able to fill in all of your blank spots on your sheet. There's my infinity screen. All right. So here's an arm in position, holding something. Thanks, Frenchie. Frenchie got everything. Cool. All right. The lag on this is rough, but we're getting there. This is working. All right, so what do I do with this arm? Right? And maybe to start with, I would have like let's say, like my gesture, something like that. I'd have some kind of a gesture down to help guide me. Then I would have my contours kind of like measured and mapped out. I'm going to pretend that that's what's happening here. Right? So the idea here is that you've already got an arm kind of drawn in and measured and feeling pretty good. Right? If I'm going to figure out what the anatomy is doing, and knowing the anatomy ahead of time can really help me. Oh, thanks, Frenchie. Yeah, if you came in late and you're missing a few, just you can rewatch this stream later as well, or someone in the chat can help you fill them out. If I flat out didn't mention something that I should have, just let me know. As far as I can tell, I did, but if not, I can go back and speak to it real quick. All right, so what I'm going to do in this arm is I'm going to find the bony landmarks first, and I'm going to start at the top and just kind of work my way down. It's always a good guess that they're going to be called something weird, but at least with biceps and triceps, you're lucky. They are just regular old biceps and triceps. All right, so for the arm, first thing, acromion, I'm going to look for where that bony sort of jut at the top of the shoulder should be, and I'm just going to say there. We'll call that acromion. And that's pretty much my only bony landmark up at the top. The rest of this is all going to be muscle. So it's down to the elbow I go. What bony situation am I looking for down at the elbow? I'm looking for an olecranon, which is that sharp, pointy bit of the elbow. And there are quite a few bumps down through here. But if I look at one, there's a bunch of wrinkles on this one. This is obviously, if this person were to bend his arm up, this is obviously what would become that sharp bump. So that is my olecranon. Here's that divot I was talking about before. So I can see this flow of stuff happening up into this divot area. I could lay that in if I felt so inclined. Where's my medial epicondyle? Well, it's up underneath. I don't really see it. I mean, I could imagine where it is, somewhere around here, I would guess. Maybe like right there, but I don't see it. So I'm gonna just leave it as is. So there's acromion to olecranon. Then where's that little bone? Well, head of the ulna is right there. It's that little bone at the wrist. And I'm looking at mine right here at my desk, and it's pretty drastic. I've got quite a bump there for that bone. And then if I wanted to, I could be like the other bone in the wrist is something like that. Right, so that's pretty much all I need. And I might, you know what I might do? If I look here, I can see a little line right there. And if I imagine this, I'll just throw that straight line in there. Right? That's how that bone is oriented. It's got a little more curve to it, maybe. It's got a little more, bony nature to it. But for the sake of a landmark, I'm just going to make it that straight line. Right? So that's my real basic map of what's going on in this arm. If I were to lay the bones in entirely, which I have done, that's sort of what they would look like in orientation. And this is really, it's a bit overkill, but it is a helpful exercise to do, to sort of draw the bones in position as you would see them on the model. The nice thing about bones, as I've said before, is they hold still, like they don't flex and get bigger or smaller or, at least not crazily. So you can always rely on the anchor points of the bones to be descriptive, because they don't change much person to person, across the gamut of humankind. They stay pretty remarkably similar in a way that muscles don't. Right? Muscles get much larger or thin and stringy, barely there, or overwhelming. Bones tend to be overwhelming as far as being large. Bones tend to kind of stay reasonably in a similar size range and so on. They don't bend, that kind of stuff. Right? So there's my map. I'm going to just turn opacity down on this and change color. There we go. All right, so given those bony landmarks, what are the muscles doing? Well, I like to start up here. There's bigger muscle groups up in the upper arm, so it's easier to kind of piece together what's going on. I know that deltoideus is going to wrap around that acromion. Now I'm going to make it a little bit more perspective-y. So let's pay attention to deltoideus just for a second. I see a little contour, like a double contour up here. I'm going to make sure and get that. So there's one, there's the other, there's even one like that. Right? That's a little bit of perspective, a little bit of contouring on that muscle that's really going to be quite nice and helpful. Then I know this acromion goes back down the back a ways on that scapula. And from there comes the rest of this deltoideus. So I'm expecting a line that kind of swoops like this. And I can see it. It gets a little bit lost here, but I'm going to bring it back. So here's maybe where it attaches. All right, I'm going to call that reasonable. All right, so there's deltoideus. I'm going to get triceps in next because it's the next biggest. Well, it's like the biggest muscle in the arm there. It's quite large. So where is my strap of tendon? I know that triceps, I now know triceps attaches to olecranon in some strap of tendon that's kind of flat-ish. Where is that strap? Well, right here, there, and there. I have this kind of flat-ish area. So there's that flat strap. And I know it bulges from that strap. It goes from behind deltoideus and bulges from that strap. I know that it peaks up from behind deltoideus here, so it doesn't cross over onto the front at all. There's like there's a border, or should be, right through here. And if I put my X-ray goggles on, I can see right there where that separation is going to be. Down in this small little tube. And then this guy's buff, so we see a little bit of we even see a little bit of separation there. All right, so that's what that tricep is doing. All right, that's the back of the arm. So if I move around to the front of the arm, I'm looking for a couple of muscles up here. So I have that one flashy one everybody knows about, which is the biceps. And then I also have brachialis, which I might not be looking for, I might not know about. Strangely enough, in this orientation, in this situation, and it's not strange at all, it's just what happens from this angle. From this orientation, I see way more brachialis than I do biceps. So this bulge here, a little bit of fill in there. This bulge is brachialis. Right. And that leaves this tiny little thing is biceps. I'm just going to write that here. And that's brachialis. Here's that gap I was talking about before. So one thing I'm going to be looking for in this gap, I'm looking for brachioradialis. That's the name of the muscle. It goes from the brachium, which is right about here, down to the radius, which is what this slant is. And you can just think of it, instead of, oh, it goes to the radius, you can just be like, it wants to go to the thumb. All right, whatever the thumb is in line with is where this muscle is going to head. All right, so I'm looking for something that flows from up here, out of this, and down to that point. And I have a very good candidate right here. Brachioradialis. All right, I already had my ulna. So here I am looking at the top of the wrist. I've got my line for the ulna, so I know there's not going to be any muscles. There's going to be a bunch that flow through here, and none of them are going to cross that line that I put for the ulna. There's not going to be any line crossing going on. So my extensors come down through this section, and they start right up in this divot, right up in this sort of small circle that I made before. If I were going to shorthand these, I could even include that little guy as well. There's my extensors. And it's just a group of muscles that run kind of straight-ish along the back of the arm there. Do I see any flexors? Yes, I do. So from the medial epicondyle, which again is up underneath, there's going to be muscles that flow down, or they kind of bulge out there and head towards the front side of the wrist. Do I have anything like that? Yes, I do. They happen on the other side of this line. So here's that line. And here, so extensors, flexors. So if I turn this guy off, that's the map that I've got of that arm. And you can see it feels with the overlap I've got here with that bone line there for the ulna. There's that other bone. This is feeling very structurally accurate, and it's just a bunch of kind of generalized line muscle routes. Really, if I know where these are, I can come into a drawing that I'm doing and add overlaps or know which of these contours is important to get, what I should do with my shading, where I should see an overlap. All of that stuff is cumulatively going to increase the convincing believability of the anatomy of the figure that I'm drawing. And it's going to assist me as I'm drawing other things or drawing from my imagination. What would this be like? If I have a handle on the anatomy, I'll have a way better chance of showing it clearly or making good decisions about how things should be designed in the drawing. So if I were to, I'm going to turn those layers off. If I were to draw this in just to give you an idea, there's those bones again. There's how those muscles route if I'm taking more time and being careful with them. So there it is without the image. All right. So that does it for the arm anatomy. That's going to get us out here a little bit early. So normally we go to 11:30. I'll still hold the Zoom session at 11:30. So look in your announcements or in the Canvas announcements for that. Every day there's going to be a Zoom session at 11:30. I'm just going to be sitting there with an open Zoom window. Anybody who is interested or needs to can visit that Zoom, ask questions, and so on. All right, can I just get one final word from the chat? If someone could just type in that you saw everything, you're looking at that muscle overlay arm right now, and your anatomy packet's all filled out, so I know we hit everything. And then after that, otherwise we will see you in the Zoom session if you need. Just a reminder, tomorrow, 10 a.m. tomorrow, I actually have a sheet of black paper now. I did it on dark green last time. I'll do it on black tomorrow. I'm going to put another reference in the assignment area and do another drawing on the black paper for tomorrow so that you can get another demonstration. Especially and particularly if you missed the live stream on the first one and maybe still have questions, or you tried the black paper drawing and it didn't really come off so well, or you ran into issues or problems or something like that. I can speak to those and address those in the live stream tomorrow as well. All right, Frenchie gave me the thumbs up on the stream. So I'm going to go ahead and post this one to YouTube. You can watch it later. Thanks, Paula. Thanks, Lindsay. All right, good. I'll post this to YouTube. You can watch it later, which might come actually in particular handy if you're taking the quiz on the 3D program. But anyway, you can look for that to be posted up. Or I guess it automatically posts to YouTube. So, all right, that does it for me here. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'll see you folks tomorrow if I see you. Otherwise, have a good one. Hope you're staying safe and social distancing properly. Thanks, Delilah. All right. Bye, everybody.